very nice to see everyone, and it's very great honor to have my dad talk again on this topic about which he is very passionate. The first session was really good and a really great setup for the second session. We certainly here in Perth enjoyed it a lot, and many compliments were given, and really people gained a lot from it, and people are looking forward to the second session. So we're over to the boss man, the man who knows all these things. It's really a great honor. It is really a great honor to have someone who is so well versed in all of these ideas and all of these different areas of halakha, and who's able to make it easy for us to understand as well. That's also a great benefit for us. So, Dad, all yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. It's interesting because I think we had about 40 odd computers live last week, and we've had over 50 viewings of the recording as well. So I think this indicates to me and to everyone that actually this is a topic which people want to know about, and it's wonderful that they want to know about it, because what it means is, it means that they care about Shabbat, because if they didn't care about Shabbat, they'd just do whatever they wanted to do anyway. And it means they care about pikuach nefesh. They care about treating people, treating illness, and making sure that it's all done correctly. And the fact that we have had such a response is very encouraging to me, because as Dan said, it is something that I'm passionate about. And as I explained to you last week, one of the reasons I'm passionate about it is because unfortunately things go wrong. And when they go wrong in this scenario, the consequences can be disastrous. So it's gratifying to me that people are interested in this topic. And the idea is that not that I should give you a chapter and verse sources of everything of the halakha, because if you want that, that's a different shiur altogether. Those of you who are interested in knowing chapter and verse about where all these rules come from and how we decide what to do that, feel free to contact me or Avril at the Tchelet team, and we can go through all that. But the idea of these shiurim was not to be an academic treatise and to show you how clever I am and how much I know, which isn't very much, despite what Dan said. But the idea is to give you a practical instruction, if you like, of what to do on the ground should you find yourself in that position. And let's face it, we all will find ourselves in the position of being unwell to one degree or another on Shabbat sooner or later. I mean, you know, nobody goes through their life without being ill, and nobody goes through their life without going through a Shabbat. So the two things are bound to collide at some point, and we need to know what to do. So I'm going to share with you my screen, which has got the source sheet on that Avril sent out. If anybody didn't get the source sheet and wants it to be sent, then either contact me or Avril or Dan, and we can send it through to you. But in the meantime, if you haven't got it to hand, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to put it on the screen right now, and hopefully you can see that now. Could somebody give me the thumbs up if you can see that sheet? Yeah, great. Okay, so let's just very quickly let's go through what we talked about last week. Last week we set the scene by explaining that on Shabbat there are certain things that we shouldn't do, and they're split up basically into two categories: Deoraita, which are the Torah based laws, those that are direct from the Torah and have the most strength, if you like. And then there's the Rabbanan laws, the rabbinic laws that the rabbis added on to the Torah laws, a bit like the fence around the Torah, a little bit like we described it as the rope around the artifact in the museum to make sure that you don't come too close to it, and the yellow line on the platform's edge so that you don't fall off the edge onto the track. Those are the Derabanans. We also spoke about the concept of pikuach nefesh, and we had this idea of the word pikuach is to look after and to look out for, and I got some rude answers as to what you lot in Australia call a traffic warden. Apparently the real word is a ranger. We call them here in Israel a pakach, because they're looking out to make sure that you don't park where you shouldn't. So pikuach nefesh is looking out for the nefesh. The nefesh is the soul, is the body. And we spoke about the three basic categories of illness, starting with the most serious, a choleh sheyesh bo sakana, a sick person who is in danger of his life. That also includes, nearly always includes, somebody who has a limb-threatening illness as well. There is theoretically a separate category for those who have got a limb-threatening illness but not a life-threatening illness, but actually in practice the two things are the same. So we'll just stick with this. The second category being choleh she'ein bo sakana, a person who is ill but is not in any life-threatening danger. And the third category being michush ba'alma, a minor illness. And we spoke about the idea that there was a tension between these two concepts. On the one hand, Shabbat is really important. If you go and have a look at your source sheet from last week, there are numerous Torah references to keeping Shabbat, how important it is. And on the other hand, we have the trump almost all, which is the saving of a life. And we spoke about the idea that the pasuk says that we have to vachai bahem, we have to live by the Torah and live by the commandments and not die because of them. So we have this tension. On the one hand, we don't treat Shabbat lightly. Shabbat is, as we have said before, it is the everlasting sign. We say it in Kiddush, Ot hi leolam beini uvein bnei Yisrael. It is the everlasting sign of the Jew. It's the spiritual sign of the Jew. The Brit Milah is the physical sign of the Jew, but the spiritual sign of the Jew is Shabbat. It is an everlasting covenant between God and the Jewish people, and therefore it is of supreme importance. However, vachai bahem means that even Shabbat is not sufficient to trump the idea of saving somebody's life. So it's not an all or nothing situation, or as the lingo is today, a zero-sum game, I think it's called, the expression that is used today. It's not all or nothing. So there are this tension that there is between the need to guard Shabbat and make sure that we don't break Shabbat, and the need to make sure that we save lives and that we treat people appropriately. It comes into play. And we have to work out how we're going to break Shabbat and when we need to do so. So if we work our way down, we're now into new sources here. We mentioned last week the Dioraita and Derabanan. And now there are three different ways you can do an act on Shabbat. I'm talking about doing an act which is not allowed. You can do it in the normal way. So let's take, for example, switching on a light or switching on the air conditioning. You can do it in the normal way. You get your finger and you press the button and on it goes. That will be a normal action doing it. Or you could do it in a slightly different way. You could do it in an unusual way. And that is called doing it with a shinui. A shinui, the Hebrew word shinui, means to change. You do it in a different way than you would normally do it. Another expression for the same thing, and this is quite descriptive, is this that I've written here in Hebrew, ke la'achar yad. Ki la'achar yad, said quickly. You know what yad is? Yad is your hand. Ke means like, and le'achar means the other side. So it means, ki la'achar yad means the back of your hand. Now, normally when you would switch on the light or the air conditioning, you would use your finger, and usually you'd use your index finger, and you would poke the switch and it would go on. It would be unusual for you to use the back of your hand to put that switch on. It would be also unusual to use your little finger to do so. It's just a weird way of doing it. Now, there is a halachic concept that when it comes to Shabbat, in order, this sounds a bit weird to say it this way, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. In order to break Shabbat properly, you have to do the action in a normal way. If you do the action in an unusual way, then actually technically you have not completely broken Shabbat. That's not to say that you are allowed to use the back of your hand to put on the light just willy-nilly, just for the sake of it. But in a situation where you have to break Shabbat for one of the reasons that we will discuss shortly, if it is possible to do the action that is required in an unusual way with a shinui, or with the back of your hand, as it were, ki la'achar yad, doesn't literally mean only the back of your hand. You can use your elbow to pop things on. It's just doing it in a different way. That is not considered to be, inverted commas, properly breaking Shabbat. Now, you're going to say to me, well, what the difference does it make? I mean, you know, who you're trying to kid here? Pressing the button. Who cares whether you do it with your elbow, your little finger, the back of your hand, your index finger, your forehead, or any other part of your anatomy? You're pressing the button. Who are you trying to kid? Well, it's not even your nose, Deborah. Yes, you could use your nose. But there is something to it. Think about it. If you just go along and press the button, so you've pressed the button, you've done an action. But if you do it in an unusual way, there is something there telling you that actually Shabbat is precious to me, and I know I have to do this because it's pikuach nefesh, the person's ill, whatever it is, and we'll come to the individual categories shortly. But nevertheless, I am recognizing, I am making a statement to myself that Shabbat is important to me, and I am not just dismissing it, as it were, out of hand. There are times when you do dismiss it out of hand, but in a situation where it is possible to do it with a shinui, and there is no detriment to do it with a shinui, to do it differently, to do it with the back of your hand, there is a difference. Yes, in practical terms, makes no difference. You are pressing the button, the electric circuits are being made, the light goes on, the air conditioning goes on, whatever it is that you've switched. So technically, if you want to get right down to the bottom line, you're right. You've not done anything different. However, there is a huge difference psychologically, and what the Rabbanan are telling us by doing this is that they are demonstrating to us that the preciousness that we feel for the day of Shabbat, for this ot hi liolam, this everlasting sign, which is the feature of a Jew, is so important to us that we don't just do it willy-nilly, even when we're allowed to do it. We try to do it in a way that demonstrates to ourselves more than anyone that Shabbat is important. Okay, so there is another way you can do an action on Shabbat, which is also not quite the same as doing it yourself in a normal way. And that is what is known as Amira la'akum. As you can see, I've written it in Hebrew and English. Amira comes from the word omer, to say. You'll all be familiar with that word. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. And Hashem said to Moshe, Amira la'akum. Now, akum's an interesting word. It's not actually a word. It's an abbreviation. It's Rashi Tevot. It's the initials, and it stands for Ovdei. Thank you very much, Marcel. It stands for Ovdei Kochavim Umazalot. Ovdei, those who serve, Kochavim, the stars, Umazalot, and the constellations and all that kind of stuff. In other words, somebody who's not Jewish. Amira la'akum is asking a non-Jew to do the job for you. So if you happen to have in your house at the time when you need to do something for the sick person, let's say the sick person needs to have a hot drink and you haven't got any hot water available on Shabbat and you need to boil the kettle, you've got lots of different halachot that you could potentially be breaking there. You could be breaking electricity by putting the kettle on. You're breaking a bishul. You're cooking the water. You may even be cooking the coffee, depending on how you make it. So there's lots of different things. Now, if you have a non-Jewish person who happens to be handy in the house there, you may say to them, please make a cup of coffee or make a hot drink, whatever it is, for the sick person. And that is better than doing it yourself. Generally speaking, Amira la'akum is not allowed just in general purposes. If you want a cup of coffee on Shabbat and you're not an ill person, you can't say to your non-Jewish friend who happens to be with you, or staff member, or whatever it is, you can't say to them, please make me a cup of coffee. That's not allowed on Shabbat. But in the case of illness, that is a way of breaking Shabbat, which is less serious than breaking it yourself. So you can see from these ideas, these sort of stages in the way an action is done on Shabbat, we are thinking about how we can minimize, and that's the key word here, minimize the disruption to our keeping of Shabbat. Now, this is, of course, why we had a whole discussion. I don't know if we had this discussion in this shiur, or we had a discussion in one of the shiurim recently about Alexa. And we said, well, what about Alexa? If you say to Alexa, can you, Alexa, put the light on? All you've done is speak. Somebody told me that when they were listening to the recording of this shiur in which I spoke about Alexa, their Alexa went bananas. I think I said in one of them, I said, you can't say about Alexa, Alexa, what was the football score today? And their Alexa went and told them the football score. So Alexa is very sensitive. Be very careful with Alexa. I don't know, we got onto that. Anyway, so we can see here, there are different ways. We want to try and minimize the disruption to our Shabbat. Oh, I know how I got onto that, because by saying to Alexa, Alexa, put the telly on, or Alexa, play the radio, you may technically have not done anything to break Shabbat, but you have disrupted the Shabbat atmosphere. It's not the way we do things on Shabbat. That's not how it should be. And I would caution you against doing such a thing. So this idea of even when somebody needs to have Shabbat broken on their behalf, we try to do it in a way which minimizes the disruption to our keeping of Shabbat. And that would be either by Amira la'akum, saying to a non-Jewish person to do it, asking them to do it for you, or by doing it with a shinui, doing it with some kind of different way that you would normally do it. Another way, which I haven't actually written down on here because it's controversial, and that is to get somebody who's under bar mitzvah to do it. Now, this is controversial because we know that our children who are under bar mitzvah, they are not legally obliged to keep the mitzvot until they reach the age of bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. However, we do get them to keep the mitzvot, don't we? We don't say to our 12-year-old boys or our 11-year-old girls, you can do whatever you want on Shabbat until you're 12 or 13, and then you have to keep Shabbat. Of course, we don't do that. We educate them in the beauty of Shabbat. We educate them in the things that you can do and you should do, and we educate them in the things that you shouldn't do. And there is an opinion, and I have some sympathy with this opinion, although I have also sympathy with the opposite opinion. It's a difficult question. There is an opinion that says it's bad education to use your children to do the things that you can't do or don't want to do yourself. And therefore, there are some people who would say getting a child under bar mitzvah to do it is not necessarily the right thing. I would suggest to you, however, that if the child understands the concept of Shabbat, understands that actually technically it's better for a child to do it because he's not legally obligated, then that not only is that an okay thing to do, that's part of the chinuch, it's part of the education. Dan will tell you that there were a number of occasions, many occasions, when we used to get knocked on the door on a Friday night with a sick person. Somebody would come and say, can you come and see so-and-so? They're not well. And I would have to go and see this patient on a Friday night on Shabbat. Well, in those days, Manchester did not have an Eruv, and therefore there was a problem with me carrying my medical bag. And the children understood that it was their job in that situation to carry my medical bag, but they understood that it was the reason for that was because it was better that they did it under bar mitzvah than I did it, and not necessarily because it was a perfectly okay thing to do. But there are people who would say I did the wrong thing and that I should have demonstrated to the children that pikuach nefesh is so important that I'm going to carry this bag myself. And it's a debate that you can have. You can argue it both ways, and I can certainly see both sides of the argument there. But nevertheless, it remains an option to get a child who's under bar mitzvah to do the action. If it is a deoraita action, if it is a Torah law, then I think it probably is better to do it via a child, because an adult breaking a deoraita is just about, that's the worst category that we've got. So we've got these three or four ways where we can do the ostensibly forbidden act for the sick person. Let's just go on to source 2 now. And it's really the second part of source 2 that I want to go on to at the moment. So this is from the Shulchan Aruch. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Shulchan Aruch. If you want to look it up, it's Siman Shin Kaf Chet 328. And in there it says the following. I'll say it in English. For someone who has a dangerous illness, it is a commandment to break Shabbat for him. One who hurries to do this is praised. One who asks about this is a murderer. Now that's very powerful words from the Shulchan Aruch. So what he's saying is, if we are in the category of a chole sheyesh bo sakana, somebody who is in danger of losing a limb or an organ or a life, a critically ill person, then you do not stop to ask questions. You do not stop to ask a non-Jew to do the job for you. You do not think to do it with the back of your hand or with a shinui. Somebody who is critically ill, I'm going to skip over, I'm going to do it the other way around to the what I've done it on the source sheet. I'm going to source 6 first of all. Somebody who is critically ill, okay, somebody where it's critically ill. And this is split into 2 different situations. One where time is of the essence, and one is where time is not of the essence. So obviously, time is of the essence. Somebody has a cardiac arrest in front of you. Somebody needs to have immediate medical treatment. You do not go around looking for a non-Jew to ask to do the job. You do not go and try and do it in an unusual way. In the words of my great Rebbe and teacher, Rabbi Professor Abraham, his words, and it was so powerful, this, that I was discussing this with my wife this morning while we were out working, and I said, do you remember what Professor Abraham said about Shabbat? And she remembered the words exactly. The words were, he said, in this situation, Shabbos becomes Tuesday. Whatever you would do on a Tuesday, you do on a Shabbos. Forget it. Shabbos becomes Tuesday. So where you have a cholesh sheyesh bo sakana, where time is of the essence, don't mess about. Do what is necessary. And if it's a situation where time is not of the essence, but nevertheless somebody is potentially critically ill, then okay, you may then consider doing something with the back of your hand, doing it slightly differently. But if there is any doubt whatsoever that this may be a safek, a doubtful, a possible, a maybe, cholet sheyesh bo sakana, where time is of the essence, then Shabbos becomes Tuesday. Let me give you some examples that are real life examples. All of these have happened to me in the course of my career as a working GP in a Jewish community. Knock on the door on Friday night. A chap is there, breathless, panting away there. Why is he panting away? Because he has run a distance of about a mile from his home to my home to come and get me because his child is having a very severe asthma attack, right? And he has run all the way to my house instead of getting in the car or phoning me or calling an ambulance. He has run all the way. Now, okay, he wasn't a professional athlete, so for him that probably took the best part of I would say probably 12 to 15 minutes for him to reach my house. That's 12 to 15 minutes. Let's say it would have taken him 3 or 4 minutes in the car. That's 9 or 10 minutes potentially lost. And that could have been critical to this child's life. Thank God it wasn't. But I didn't run to his house. I got in the car and I drove there. He actually wouldn't come with me. He walked back, the idiot. But I went in the car, which was the correct thing to do, because I wasn't sure what situation this child was in. All I knew that this was a child having a severe asthma attack. Now, a child with a severe asthma attack may or may not be in danger of his life, but this was at the very least a safek, sakana, a doubt, a possible danger to life. Shabbos becomes Tuesday in that situation. Do not be a chochem. Do not be clever. Don't try and do things in any kind of unusual way. Do what is necessary immediately if there is any danger or potential danger of life-threatening illness. So that particular situation, and it's written here, in a time, if time is of the essence, in a time of the essence, pikuach nefesh, the action must be done in the quickest way possible. We completely ignore that it is Shabbos and we do what it takes to cure or treat the ill person. It is forbidden to delay the treatment in order to wait for a non-Jewish person. So the situation there, remember, in those kind of situations, all you need to know is Shabbos becomes Tuesday. Okay, that's it. Shabbos becomes Tuesday. Where time is not of the essence, there's a debate between the Ramban, Nachmanides, and the Rambam, Maimonides. And the Ramban is of the opinion that we should actually try and find a non-Jew, if it's possible, in order to minimize the breaking of Shabbat. The Rambam, Maimonides, disagrees and says no. He says, first of all, we believe that a person doing it for himself, or a Jewish person doing it for himself, is going to do it in a more a way which is quicker, a way which is more effective. And secondly, that the issue of the time essence is somebody's opinion. And what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? What if time really was of the essence? So the Rambam, the Maimonides, takes a much more strict view on pikuach nefesh. I could argue and say that the Rambam, the Maimonides, takes a very much more lenient view on Shabbat. But I'm not going to say that, because that's not the issue. The issue here is that the most important thing is pikuach nefesh, and the Rambam is strict on pikuach nefesh, and he says, even in a situation where you think time is not of the essence, you may be wrong. So don't take any chances, and then you don't wait around in a situation of cholet sheyesh bo sakana. The question is, what about somebody who is not a religious Jew, or somebody who is not Jewish? Do we break Shabbat for them? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, and I can only say this in one simple way: yes, it makes no difference whether the person is the chief rabbi, the Pope. It makes no difference. A human being needs to be saved. It makes no difference whether they're Jewish, not Jewish, Shomer Shabbat, not Shomer Shabbat. Somebody whose life is in danger, one breaks Shabbat in order to save them. There is a halachic discussion about whether one should break Shabbat to save the life of somebody who commits suicide or tries to commit suicide. Bottom line, again, if you want to know all the ins and outs of the various arguments, I can provide them for you. The bottom line is, makes no difference. A life is a life is a life. Okay, so it's really quite easy. Somebody where there is life-threatening danger or limb-threatening danger, then you break Shabbat in whatever way is necessary to do it. Now, the question is, what is a cholet sheyesh bo sakana? What is somebody who is somebody who falls into that category? Well, somebody who has a cardiac arrest or a heart attack right in front of your eyes, well, that's pretty obvious. They are somebody who's in danger. But there are other people who the halacha is very strict about pikuach nefesh, and there are other people who fall into that category. We alluded to it last week a bit, where we might not think they are actually physically in danger of their life. For example, a lady who has given birth in the first 3 days after giving birth is called a cholet sheyesh bo sakana in halacha. That person is called somebody who is in danger of their life. Why? Because back in the day, there was a very significant mortality in the immediate postnatal period. People got infections, people bled, and sadly, women lost their lives. We don't need to look very far in the Torah to find it, do we? Rachel Imenu died in childbirth whilst giving birth to Binyamin. So childbirth was a dangerous business. It's still a dangerous business, but thankfully not as dangerous as it was. But the halacha remains that somebody in the first 3 days after birth is considered in the category of a cholet sheyesh bo sakana. So theoretically, theoretically, somebody who's had a baby on a Thursday afternoon, on Shabbat, if they say, I want an omelette, you go and make them an omelette. You might want to say to them, do you remember it's Shabbat and do you really want an omelette? But if they really want an omelette, then technically they are in a category of chol sheyesh bo sakana, and it would be permitted to do so. We would probably say that time is not of the essence there, and so you may want to try and get a non-Jew to do it for you, or if you didn't have one, you might want to do it with a shinui. But technically, that person falls into that category. Somebody who's not ill with that would probably say, oh, okay, I forgot it was Shabbat. Okay, yeah, you're right. I don't really need an omelette. I can wait till after Shabbat. You don't need to break Shabbat for me. But technically, halachically, if they wanted it, you could do it because they are technically in that category. And that's just an example of how the halacha works, in that we take, and we do this all the time actually. If you think about it, when there are various different opinions about a halacha, we tend to go with the most stringent opinion. And if there are two different opinions, we try and do it that covers both opinions. And we do that with pikuach nefesh. And again, I stress to you that we are not being lenient on Shabbat. We are being strict about the concept of saving a life, because saving a life is the most important thing, and we are to be strict about that. As I showed you in the Shulchan Aruch, somebody who messes about and doesn't do it properly is called a murderer. There's also a comment made in the Shulchan Aruch, and this is for you, Dan. A rabbi who does not teach his community the appropriate halachot of pikuach nefesh is also called a murderer. So it is incumbent on every leader of the community to make sure that his community know the halachot of pikuach nefesh, and that they are reminded of it on a regular basis, so that they are very, very strict about it and are not what we call uberfrum and go over the top with other halachot and ignore the most important of all, which is pikuach nefesh. So a chol sheyesh bo sakana, a sick person who's critically ill, it's quite easy, really. You do what you have to do. Now, you don't do what you don't have to do. Now, for example, when I was working in hospitals, and I know that we do have some hospital doctors here with us on Zoom today. So you will know, and some of you will have been patients in hospitals, you'll know that doctors have to write up their notes. Once they've done something, you have to write it down in the notes to make sure that it's recorded and everything is there. Now, it may be that it's very important that you write up those notes. Let's say you're working in intensive care and you have a very sick person and you have given them a certain medication. Well, it's very important that you write that up, because the next person that comes along needs to know what you've given them. And that's something which, if there is nobody else to do it for you, that's something which you could ask a non-Jew to do, because it's not time critical there that second that you have to write that up. But it has to be written up, and it has to be written up in a reasonably timely manner. You can't leave it for hours and hours in case somebody comes along and they don't know that you've given that particular medication. So you have to write it up. So if there's a non-Jewish person there, you would get them to do that for you if you could. If not, you would do it with a shinui. So how do you write with a shinui? Well, you write with your other hand. If you're right-handed, you write with your left hand if you have to. And the other thing is, you minimize the amount of writing that you do. You don't say, and this is the other part of the tension, you don't say, well, I'm writing anyway, so I might as well write a whole essay of what's going on here. No, you write the minimum that is required. And I remember Professor Abraham saying to me, you don't have to put the dot on the I, right? You don't have to write every single letter. You can write it in abbreviated form as long as everybody will understand what you've written. So again, you'll say to me, oh, what difference does it make? You're writing, you're writing. You've broken Shabbat, you've broken Shabbat. No, The idea is that you are thinking about it. Shabbat's important to me. Yes, I have to do this. Sadly, I have to do an action which is forbidden on Shabbat normally, but I'm doing it for l'shem mitzvah. But nevertheless, I still try and do it in a minimal way. Similarly, if you are writing up the notes, let's say you go to your patient and it's 10 minutes till Shabbos is out, and you go and you have a management plan, and you're going to write in the notes that tomorrow morning you're going to do, there needs to be a scan done or a blood test done for this patient tomorrow morning or on Monday morning, and it's 10 minutes till out Shabbos or half an hour, you don't have to write that in there and then. It's not time critical that you have to do that there and then. Think about it. Won't do any harm if you write that up after Shabbos has gone out in half an hour's time. Nobody is going to come to any harm. You're not going to have a doctor coming along and saying, I don't know whether he's given this drug or that drug. You're talking about doing a test tomorrow morning. Write it up after Shabbat. So it's a way, again, of minimizing the amount of breaking of Shabbat that you do. So it's not an all or nothing. It's not a zero-sum game. Here, it's thinking about how I can keep the mitzvah of pikuach nefesh and at the same time minimize the amount of Shabbos violation. Let's move on to the more tricky scenario of a chole she'ein bo sakana, a sick person, but he's not in any life-threatening danger. And this will be the vast majority of scenarios that we come across. That's somebody who's not well, he's ill enough to put himself to bed, he's feeling terribly lousy, he's got the flu or a serious migraine, or he's got some kind of a flare-up of a pre-existing illness. He's not well. A person's not well, he's got a temperature, a fever, whatever it is, but he's not in any life-threatening danger. Okay, so this is called a chole she'ein bo sakana, a person who is not in danger of his life, but he is ill. Now, in this category, a person cannot do a Torah law. Let's go back up to the source number 1, Deoraita and Derabanan. A person cannot do a Deoraita in a normal action for a person who is not seriously ill, because that's not called pikuach nefesh in sakanat nefashot. It's not somebody who is in danger of their life. So somebody who needed to, who was not that ill, but wanted you to boil up a kettle of water for them on Shabbat, and there was nobody else there to do it, you would not be allowed to do that for them, because that is a deoraita, it's cooking, it's a deoraita thing, and you can't do that. What you could do is you could ask a non-Jew to do it for you, even if it was a deoraita, because that is something which is removed. You're not actually doing it yourself. That was a dirabanan. It's a fence around the Torah. And the rabbis, when they made that fence around the Torah, that rope around the artifact, that yellow line on the platform, they didn't have in mind that scenario of somebody who was ill. So somebody who is ill, but not dangerously ill, you cannot do a deoraita yourself, but you can ask a non-Jew to do the deoraita. You can also do a derabanan with a shinui. So something which is a rabbinic law, but not a Torah law. So let's use our example of muktzah that we spoke about before. Let's say somebody was ill enough to go put themselves to bed, but when they got there, they saw that somebody had dumped a whole load of muktzah items on their bed, right? A load of pens or money or something else that is muktzah. We spoke about muktzah last week. Muktzah is a derabanan. It is not a deoraita law. You don't need to find a non-Jew to move those muktzah items for somebody who's ill enough to go to bed. you can do it yourself, but you should do it with a shinui, with a kalacha yad, with the back of your hand. Do it with your elbow. Don't just pick them up and move them. Flick them off with your elbow or your nose or some other way of doing it. It's demonstrating that this is not a normal action. It's demonstrating to yourself more than anybody else that Shabbat is important, and that the action that you're doing is not breaking Shabbat just for the sake of breaking Shabbat. It's an important thing because this person's not well. So you can do the bottom line for a chole sheyesh bo sakana, somebody who's in dangerously ill. If time is of the essence, Shabbos becomes Tuesday. If time is not of the essence, well, then do it in a way which minimizes Shabbat violation. So either with a shinui or a mira la'akum. The Rambam says, don't even do that. Even if its time is not of the essence, Shabbos becomes Tuesday. A person who is not in danger of his life, but is ill enough, you can get a non-Jew to do anything that the person requires, even if it's a Torah prohibition, or you can do a rabbinic prohibition yourself, but with a shinui, with a kilachar yad. Now, we'll go on to the next bit. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I want to go on to source 3 now. This is michush ba'alma, which means a minor thing, a bit of a headache, a bit of a something, something that's not enough to put you to bed. It's just a little bit of an irritation. So it might be, I don't know, let's say, and I'm not talking about an allergy here. Let's say a wasp sting. If you're allergic to wasp stings and you get a wasp sting, you're a chole sheyesh bo sakana. You could be in potential danger of your life. I'm not talking about that. A person who's not allergic to wasp stings, he gets a bit of a wasp sting, or he has a bit of a headache. I'm not talking about a thumping migraine where you have to go to bed in a darkened room. A bit of a headache. That's called michush ba'alma. Now, some people, some strict opinions, do not allow even the taking of a painkiller, even of taking a paracetamol, Acamol, or whatever you call it in Australia, for such a thing on Shabbat. Now, you might say, that's a bit harsh. Why should we not be allowed to take a pill? Well, the reason that we don't take a pill, it's a derabanan. Why? What's the derabanan? The derabanan, as we've said, is a law that the rabbis brought in order to prevent a, inverted commas, proper breaking of Shabbat by breaking a Torah law. One of the 39 main categories of activity, creative activity, which is not allowed on Shabbat, is something called tochen, grinding. You cannot take flour, you cannot take wheat, for example, and grind it. What you cannot do on Shabbat is use your fancy sea salt or black peppercorn thingamajig, that you grind with you twist the top and it grinds lovely fresh black pepper or lovely fresh sea salt. You can't use that on Shabbat. That is an av malacha. That is a main category of work. That is a deoraita. You can't use that. It's grinding. You're not allowed to do it. You also cannot put anything into a mortar and use a pestle and grind it like that. It's grinding. That is tochen. That is not allowed. Now, those of you who are of a certain vintage will remember that back in the day, you could go to a pharmacist and he would actually make you things. Instead of just taking them out of his drawer in a packet and putting a label on it and giving it to you, he would actually make you stuff. You would take a prescription from the doctor and he would go in the back and he'd get out his pestle and his mortar and various bits and pieces, and he would grind all sorts of stuff into a paste or whatever it was, and then you would bring you back your medication. And that's how medications were made until not that long ago. I've no idea exactly when. Somebody may know this better than me, but it can't be more than 70 years since the majority of medications were made on site by the old-fashioned grinding method. So taking of medication back in the day almost always involved grinding of some sort. So the rabbis said, we're not going to allow you, well, the Torah says you can't do grinding. The rabbis said, we are going to forbid even taking pills that you're not grinding on Shabbat, in case next time you need a pill and you need a grinding type of medication, that you do the grinding. It's the fence around the Torah, it's the rope around the museum artifact, it's the yellow line on the platform. It's the this is the classical D'Rabbanan. And for a Michush Ba'alma, there are some people that say that you can't even take a paracetamol, even though you're not grinding. But next time you might grind. Now, that was the opinion of just about every posek, just about every person making the rules until, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago. The more recent modern poskim are saying now, it's a minority opinion, but it is taking a little bit more traction, and it makes sense that it's taking more traction. There is a debate that says that today, when medications are almost never ground out at source, as it were. So if you've got your headache, you're not going to go into your spice cupboard and start grinding up, bits of this and bits of that and the other and mix it all together and take a potion. You're more likely to go to the box and get your paracetamol and take 2 paracetamol with a drink of water. And there's nothing wrong with that. So there are opinions today that say, since the chances of you coming to grind anything as a result of taking medication on Shabbat, we can be more lenient even in Michush Ba'alma. Now, the reason that I'm spending a little bit of time on this is because I think it's actually a very important philosophy. And that is that we find it very, very difficult today to alter the halakha, to make the halakha more lenient. We find it very easy. It's very easy to make the halakha more stringent. Any idiot can say, no, you can't. You don't have to be brilliant to do that. But rabbis today are reluctant to go more lenient on things. Partly it's political, because the rabbis that particular rabbi doesn't want to be seen to be, a bit sort of lefty and a bit sort of not very frum. But there's also a humility aspect to this. The modern day rabbis don't feel capable of disagreeing with great rabbis from previous generations. And there's certainly an important feature there to be considered. However, for me, the overriding concept of halakha is that it should be, to a degree, dynamic. It's always meant to have been dynamic. It's always meant to have been, the halakha is meant to be interpreted for each generation appropriately. And that's why we have the oral law. The oral law was, surprise, surprise, oral for many, many years. It was only in the year around about 200 that Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, he was known, arranged the Mishnah and wrote it down, because it was in being danger. The oral law was in danger of being forgotten. The problem with writing it down is it then has difficulty in dynamizing, has difficulty in coming along with the modern world. The problem is, if you start messing with the halakha, then you're going to argue, you're going to have the slippery slope argument. You say, okay, well, I'm going to change this, I might as well change something else, and that'll lead to something else. And that's why people are reluctant to do it. But in this idea, with the taking of pills on Shabbat, there is definitely a debate being had amongst contemporary poskim as to whether one should allow that. It depends who you ask, of course. The consensus among the Haredi rabbis is that it is still not allowed. There is more of attraction in the modern Orthodox world to allow it, on the basis that the chances of you coming to grind something up are almost zero, and that you understand that that was the basis of the original halakha in the first place. So I've used that example as a peg to hang on. But we're up for time, and now I'm going to stop in a couple of minutes, and then we can have questions. So let me just summarize what we have said so far. We have said that Shabbat is extremely important. It is the Ot Hiliolam, it's the everlasting sign between God and the Jew, and therefore we take it very seriously. However, Pikuach Nefesh, saving a life, trumps it. However, that doesn't mean it's a zero-sum game. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want. We have different categories of the way you break Shabbat. You either do it in a normal fashion, or you do it with a shinui, a slightly different way, or you get a non-Jew to do it for you. The other side of the coin is the type of ill person we're talking about. Somebody who is critically ill and the time is of the essence. Shabbos becomes Tuesday, no questions asked. If time is not of the essence, then there are two different opinions as to whether you should consider doing one of the actions of either Amir La'akum, speaking to a non-Jew to do it for you, or doing it with a shinui or not. But in any kind of safek, whenever there is the slightest doubt, Shabbos becomes Tuesday. Somebody who is ill enough to go to bed and be really not very well at all, but is not in danger of their life, then a person can only do for them a violation of a rabbinic prohibition, using a shinui, doing it in a different way. You cannot do a Torah prohibition. However, you can get a non-Jew to do a Torah prohibition for you, for somebody who is in that category. And somebody who is in the third category of Michush Ba'alma, you cannot do anything really for them, except perhaps doing a Dira Banan with a Shinui, or getting asking a non-Jew to do it for you, if depending on which one it is. The bottom line is, for a Michush Ba'alma, there are opinions that say you can take some pills but nothing else. Truth is, if you've only got a Michush Ba'alma, you probably don't need anything more than a paracetamol anyway, and so that's all fine and dandy. So and finally, the one thing I want to stress again is that the halakha is extremely strict about pikuach nefesh, and it puts people in the category of people who are ill, who you might think are not ill. So, for example, the lady who's just given birth is called somebody who's critically ill. Somebody who is a woman in the first 30 days after giving birth is called a chola she'ein bo sakana. She's called somebody who is ill and is not in life-threatening. Even if she's completely and utterly fine, halachically she's in that category, because the halacha is very, very strict about pikuach nefesh. And again, I want to leave you, before we go on to questions, I want to leave you, by the way, there is a study done which showed that in a consultation with a doctor, the patient only ever remembers the first thing you say and the last thing you say. Anything in the middle, they don't remember. So we were always taught that the last thing you should say is the instructions you want them to remember. So when they've got their hand on the door handle on the way out, you're meant to say to them, don't forget 1 pill 3 times a day, or whatever it is, the instructions you want to give, because that's the only thing they're going to remember. So if the only thing you're going to remember of this shiur is going to be the last thing I'm going to say, this is the last thing I'm going to say. Go and look at the Shulchan Aruch. For someone who has a dangerous illness, it is a commandment to break Shabbat for him. One who hurries to do this is praised. One who messes about and asks a shaila is called a murderer. When in doubt, don't mess about. Okay? Shabbos becomes Tuesday. And that way, we will not have any avoidable deaths, will not have any tragedies like the one I described to you last week. It may be that we will unfortunately break Shabbat on an occasion when we shouldn't do so, but we will have saved lives by that philosophy. And lives being saved are the most important thing. V'chai bohem, we have to live by the Torah. The Torah is for living by, not for dying for, except in the cardinal sins, which we mentioned. The Torah is v'chai bohem. We need to live by them and not to die by them. So remember, if you remember nothing else, remember the Shulchan Aruch. Shabbos becomes Tuesday. And I'll stop there and open it up to questions. Anybody who's got a question, if you can press the hand up thingy, then that'll be fun. Oh, I knew you'd be first, David. Yes, come on, David. What difficult question have you got for me today?
No, it's not, Rabbi, it's purely a clarification that I'd like. You said a life is a life, regardless if it's a pope or the greatest Torah scholar. I understood that. If we take Shabbat out of the equation and we are caught in a triage situation, to save a Jewish life or to save a non-Jewish life, what takes precedence? Okay, I'm not talking about Shabbat. I'm talking about a triage situation where you have to choose who you're going to save.
Okay, it's a very good question. And it is a question which is dealt with at length in the halachic sources. It's not something I can answer you now because it's a very long subject. I do have on my YouTube channel, I do have a whole shiur on the triage of resources. I think actually, Avril will correct me if I'm wrong, we've got several shiurim on because it was not in, we had too much for that. I will send you via Dan the link to that, and you can watch it at your leisure, and you'll know all the answers to that question. It's a long answer to a very difficult question. Bottom line, if I had to say it in one sentence, first come, first served.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes, Dan.
One of the things that comes up a lot is not just taking driving to hospital. What about driving back from hospital if you get released from hospital on Shabbat, or taking a taxi on to home from hospital? And let's say we're not in a dangerous area. Let's say it's not, coming home from Liverpool Women's Hospital in Toxteth or Wythenshawe Hospital in Wythenshawe. It's not a dangerous place, but still it's far on Shabbat. What is the halacha about taking a taxi for a patient who's been released from hospital on Shabbat? Okay,
good question. If I may, let me talk about going to hospital on Shabbat first, and then I'll ask the coming home from. Going to hospital on Shabbat, if we are talking about a non-life-threatening illness, we're talking about a chola she'ein bo sakana, somebody who's not in life-threatening danger. We already said that the best way to do that is amira la'akum, is to get a non-Jew to do it for you. So it's much better to take a taxi with a non-Jewish driver than it is to drive yourself in that situation. However, if it's a chola sheyesh bo sakana, somebody who is in critical illness, Shabbos is Tuesday, you drive yourself. Okay, so now we've got to the hospital. We're now been treated and we're going to come back from the hospital. There is something where you have another tension that goes on here, and that is something called oneg Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat means delight on Shabbat. Shabbat is meant to be something which you do delightfully. It's a spiritual delight. We have good food physically, but we also have a spiritual delight as well. We sing Zmirot, we go to hear a good shiur, we have a discussion about spiritual matters, whatever it is, on Shabbat. Being stuck in a hospital, miserable, with no food and no spirituality is not oneg Shabbat. If you are able to get home on Shabbat via Amira La'akum, in other words, asking a non-Jewish taxi driver to take you, then that is permitted. I had exactly this situation a little while ago. I had to go into hospital for a routine procedure, and the only day that they could do it was on a Friday in the winter. There was otherwise I wouldn't have got this procedure done. Anyway, cut a long story short, the Shabbat had already come in when I had finished, and the choice was either I stayed in Hope Hospital in Salford in a pretty miserable situation all of Shabbat, or I got home somehow. It was too far to walk, and I wasn't in a situation where I could walk. So I asked the non-Jewish nurse to organize a taxi for me, and I went in that taxi. Now, there are certain things that you have to do, and that is you have to try and get the taxi driver to open the door for you, so you don't open the door and switch the light on and all those kind of things. So there are things, again, you have to think how to do it. The problem I had, and this is, I mean, it's not funny really. So on this particular situation, the nurse called the taxi. I went in the taxi. I got the guy to open the door for me. I sat next to him, and we're driving home. It was a journey of maybe 15 minutes. After about 5 minutes, he says to me, "Don't I know you?" I said, "Don't know. Maybe you do. My name's Jonathan Lieberman." And I thought maybe he's a patient of mine, you know, because I was the doctor in that area. He said, "Yes, I remember you. I used to play football against you when you played for Maccabi. I used to play for somebody else in the Manchester Jewish Soccer League." Turns out this taxi driver was a Jew. But of course, I didn't know that at the time. What am I meant to do then? Am I meant to say, "Stop the car, I've got to get out. Can't have you doing this for me"? Well, you can't do that anyway. I got home, and that was it. But it didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to work out. But the correct thing to do in that situation is to minimize the Shabbat disruption. But it is permitted to ask a non-Jew to order you a taxi, and hopefully you'll get a non-Jewish taxi driver to take you home. What about payment? Well, if it's possible to get the guy to either, if you can get it prepaid, in other words, if you can predict that this is going to happen and you can prepay it, that's fine. If you can't prepay it and he's willing to come back after Shabbat to get his money, then that would be good. And if you can't do that, and he's got a contactless thingamajig for his credit card, then you can give him your credit card and he can do the touch or put the numbers in for you. There's all sorts of ways you can minimize the Chilul Shabbat. Remember, the use of money on Shabbat is a d'Rabbanan, because and therefore it's not as terrible as grinding your pills. Does that answer the question? I think it probably does. Any other questions?
Yes. Can I ask why, if the father who ran round to your house in Manchester with a child who had an asthmatic attack, you mentioned that you got into the car, obviously very rightly, to go to see the child. Why would it have been more sensible for him to get in the car with you rather than walking home? The child was already going to get help via you. If he'd arrived 15 minutes later, would that have mattered?
Might have done. What if I needed something in the house? What if he had 7 other kids that his wife was trying to calm down, and I needed some help to ventilate this child, or to or to calm the child down or to hold him. It might well have done. And that was the situation of Safek Sakanat Nafashot. And what he did in the first place, which was to run round and not to get in the car or to phone me, was wrong.
Yes.
And what he did in the second place, not to get in the car with me, was also wrong.
Right. Thank you.
I think that I went with
in
on
a
that.
situation.
Great, Dad. I think I remember that. I think I remember going with him. I was under bar mitzvah, and I think I called the ambulance.
Could well be. Could well be.
I think I remember that.
Yeah. I just want to say one other thing before we take another question. Just a corollary to the question that Dan asked. The situation is this. We talked about getting home from the hospital on Shabbat. What about me? What about me in the situation I've just described? I got in the car to go and see this asthmatic kid. Now, I've dealt with the asthmatic kid now. He's okay. He's either gone to hospital in an ambulance or whatever it is. We've sorted him out. I'm finished my job. Am I allowed to drive home? Am I allowed to drive home, or should I walk home? Am I allowed to carry my bag home, or should I leave it in the house of the patient? Well, it's an interesting question, because the simple answer is, well, if I've only got one car, well, then for sure I need to drive home, because the chances are when I get home and I'm just sat down to have my soup again, somebody else will knock on the door and I'll be off again, and I might need a car. So I can't be left without a car on Shabbat. But what if I've got two cars? Maybe I should leave the car there, walk home, and then if the next person comes, then I've still got another car at home. I can go in that one. Maybe I don't need to drive home. Now, I could make that decision for myself and decide that I'm going to walk home. But actually, the halacha allows, doesn't say that you have to, but allows the doctor to drive home in that scenario. And it's a fascinating reason why. It comes from a Gemara. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's in Masechet Beitza, but I could be wrong. The situation that the Gemara describes is this. In the olden days, before we had fridges and all that stuff, people used to go to shops and get their stuff on a daily basis, including on Yom Tov. They would go to the shopkeeper would open up his shop, put out his store, his food and stuff. The person would come, and after Shabbos, they'd go and pay for it. After Yom Tov, not Shabbos, on Yom Tov, talking about on Yom Tov. He would go and get his food, and he would take it home, cook his food, because you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov, and then he would go back after Yom Tov and pay for the food that he'd taken. Now, the rabbis allowed the shopkeepers, in those days, the shopkeepers, they had these shutters. They were like on a hinge. It would hinge like that. So you'd have the shop front, as it were, was shuttered up, and you'd undo the thing and you'd bring down the thing, and that would be the table where you'd put your wares. Now, the halacha is that the shopkeepers were allowed to open that up, because if they didn't, then people wouldn't have food to eat on Yom Tov. Then they wouldn't have Oneg Yom Tov. So they were allowed to open up their shops. So the question that was asked is, well, okay, they've all come and taken their food. The question now is whether the shopkeeper is allowed to close the shop again, because that's not for Oneg Yom Tov. That's not going to help anybody's Yom Tov by closing the shop. So the answer that the rabbis came to, the conclusion was, and it's a concept called Sofo Mishum Tchilato. We allow the end because of the beginning. In other words, if we don't allow the shopkeeper to close his shop, then he's not going to open it in the first place, because he's not going to open it, leave it open, and then everybody's going to come and nick his stuff. So the rabbi said, well, if we don't allow him to close it, he won't open it in the first place, and then there won't be any food for Oneg Yom Tov, and therefore we allow the shopkeeper to close the shop on Yom Tov. It's the same idea with the doctor driving home from the patient. If I have to drive a 15-minute drive to the patient and it's a 45-minute, an hour's walk back, I might not do it if I have to walk back. So the halacha is that if I want to, I can drive back. I might decide not to, but I actually am allowed to, because of this concept of the shopkeeper on Yom Tov, of sofo mishum tchilato. It's a concept which is applied to the doctor driving to the patient. We've got some hands up. Rachel Marks.
Hi. Yeah, two things. First of all, just as a matter of interest, my son Daniel, when he had his second child, she had it on a Friday, Rosh Hashanah, in St. Mary's Hospital. And he walked back through Friday night to get back home afterwards. And Dan Westheim said that he should have taken a taxi because he was in danger going through town.
There you go.
That was an interesting thing. Now, the other question is, when my father was in hospital, he actually died on a Friday night, but we would have walked up to Hope. Now, could we have taken a car to go and visit him? He was dying.
Okay, so the question here is what are you achieving by going to visit him? And the answer is you are going to give him some kind of sipuk. You're going to give him some kind of relief, emotional relief, knowing that his family is there. That's a very, very important part of treating a patient. The psychological aspect of having his family around him is certainly sufficient to say that this person, if you are not there, that may well have hastened his death, because he would have been more psychologically distressed and may well have hastened his death. Without a doubt, you could have taken a taxi. There is no question about that whatsoever. Depending on the individual circumstances, it's certainly a possibility that you could have driven there yourself as well, because of what I've just said. Each case needs to be looked at on its merits, obviously, but taking a taxi, Amira La'akum, as we've seen, speaking to a non-Jew and asking them to do it is a much lower level of problematic breaking of Shabbat. And in that scenario, for certain, you could have got a taxi to the hospital in that scenario. My youngest child was also born on Shabbat in Hope Hospital, actually, and I actually walked back from Hope Hospital. It wasn't such a terrible area to walk through the Salford 6. It wasn't so bad. And I felt safe to do so. Had I not felt safe to do so, then I would have taken a taxi back on the basis of the psak that Dan Westheim Zatzal gave. So don't dismiss the psychological benefit. We're not just talking about physical treatment here. We're talking about psychological treatment as well. Psychological treatment involves being with somebody, a woman going in to give birth, who will feel very nervous without having a husband there or without having a doula there or whatever. That person has to consider this person's a chola sheyesh bo sakana. A woman in labor is a person who is considered a chola sheyesh bo sakana, somebody who's critically ill. You can do whatever you want for a person who is in labor. Obviously, again, we try and minimize it you can, but bottom line is what we said before. Chola sheyesh bo sakana, Shabbos becomes Tuesday, if necessary. Dan.
Okay, someone has sent me a text to ask a question about opening blister packs of pills and things like that on Shabbos. Certainly in a case of Michush Ba'alma, what about that? About just the headache pills. Okay. Are you allowed to open blister packs because it's
okay? So the let's assume that we're going to paskin that a Michush Ba'alma is allowed to take pills. Let's just start at that position. You've got a blister pack whereby you can pop open, you normally pop open the blister and out comes the pill. Usually there's writing on those blister packs. So when you open the blister, you break the writing, and that's not allowed. It's one of the, it's a drabanan. So you would try not to do that. If you could, you would open it the other way. In other words, you get a little bit of a get a knife or a scissors, not a scissors, but you get a knife or something or a fork, and you open it the back way. In other words, that's a classic kilachayad, isn't it? It's doing it the upside down way. You're recognizing, the concept is you're recognizing that what you're doing is not ideal to be doing it on Shabbat, and I'm going to do it in a way that makes me remember that it's Shabbat, and I'm trying to minimize the violation of Shabbat. So the blister pack, try and open it the other way. If you can't open it the other way, instead of doing it with your finger or something, do it with your left hand instead of your right hand, and try and minimize the amount of yourself. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got another one. Also been sent to me. Does the person, if on the way home, if you're taking a taxi home from the hospital, do you, when you do the Amir al-Akum, when you talk to the non-Jewish person to get them to do it, are you allowed to ask them directly, or do you have to hint to them? Okay.
In a situation where there is no danger, and you're saying Amir al-Akum, if it's possible to hint, well, and to not say it directly, well, then that's what you should do, because that's one step further away. It's all about how far away can we get from breaking Shabbat without putting any danger in the situation. So obviously, if we're dealing with something where time is of the essence, you're not going to mess about saying to somebody, oh, hello, Mr. Non-Jew, I've got somebody at home who's just had a cardiac arrest. It would be a good idea, I think, if we had an ambulance. No, of course not. Shabbos is Tuesday and you phone the ambulance yourself. In a situation where we're not dealing with that situation, and it's possible to hint to the taxi driver. It's pretty difficult to hint where your address is. But the point here is that, again, you'll say to me, well, what difference does it make? Hinting, saying it direct. It's a philosophy. It's a concept here. Remember, why are we keeping Shabbat? We're not keeping Shabbat because there's an old man in the sky with a long beard down to his pupik who's going to say, tut, 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 you didn't keep Shabbat. No, Shabbat's for us. We are the ones that benefit from this. What we want to do is to make sure that Shabbat remains precious to us. And so it's a philosophy. It's the idea of thinking about it. And yes, if it's possible to do it by an indirect means, then one should do so. But one should not beat oneself up about it if it's not possible. If it's Amir al-Akum is allowed, then Amir al-Akum is allowed. Any other questions before we call it a day?
Are you going into the chats? Will you be going into the chats?
I'll go into the chat. Let's have a look. I'll just take Vivian's question first. And
okay.
Then I'll look at the chat. Yes, Vivian.
Hi, excellent as always, Johnny. Thank you. So you answered the question about opening blister packs if it's paracetamol, Acamol, for something minor. What about if it's medication that you take on a regular basis for potentially serious?
The day before.
Well,
open on a Friday.
I'm just gonna.
They're not in this scenario. They're not yet open. So what does one do?
Okay, so obviously, if you knew you had to take them, then get them ready before Shabbat. Obviously, you're in a situation where you've forgotten, it's not been done. Whatever it is, a situation there. Again, if it's possible to do it kilachayad, then you do it kilachayad. Sometimes it's not possible to do it. If, however, somebody is, let's say, somebody's having an angina attack, and you need to open a blister pack of GTN, or the spray has got some kind of packaging on it. That is, time is of the essence. It may not be life-threatening, but nevertheless, this person is suffering. You don't have to mess about doing things kilachayad in that scenario. However, if it doesn't matter, if it takes you another 5 minutes to get the pill out, well, then that's fine. Do it kilachayad, do it in a way which reminds you that we're not breaking Shabbos willy-nilly. That's the concept we have to have in our minds, that Shabbos is important, but pikuach nefesh is more important. And it's not a zero-sum game. Those are the things that if you have those three concepts in your mind, together with the basic knowledge that we've spoken about today and that's on the source sheets, you ought to be able to work out for yourself pretty much most scenarios. And again, if in doubt, don't mess about. Okay, if in doubt, don't mess about. That is the bottom line. Let me have a look in the chat now. Let me have a look and see the questions. See if we can go through those. Okay, so Batsheva says, if one has the air conditioner set up with a Shabbat timer, and you need set up with a Shabbat timer, and you need it, and it is already set up for Shabbat, can you add another period of time? A difficult question, because there are different opinions. Rav Moshe Feinstein was very unhappy, really, about the use of time switches. It was we need to understand about time switches that it was not something which is blanket allowed. Time switches were allowed reluctantly for certain situations only, for heating, and I suppose that includes air conditioning as well, food and light. Those three basic things, food, heating and light, they were reluctantly allowed the use of time switches. Then we've got the situation of, if you've got it set up, can you add in another time? Or alternatively, can you make it go off sooner than you wanted to? Come on sooner or go off sooner? It's a complicated issue, and it depends on the scenario, and it depends on who you go by. Some poskim do not allow you to do that. Most poskim do not allow you to add in things to go on sooner, although it can be, it's easier to sort of delay it going off, if you like. But it's not a simple answer to a simple question, to be honest. So it depends on the scenario. However, if we are dealing with somebody who is a choleh, somebody who is sick, even somebody who is a choleh she'ein bo sakana, we can be more lenient on those things. If it's just because you happen to be a little bit warm and you want it to, oh, isn't it warm in here? I think I'll make the air conditioning come on in half an hour instead of in an hour. No. But if you've got an ill person there who's lying in bed with a fever, and actually would make them feel a lot easier if you had the air conditioning and you had it set up, then it would be much easier to allow you with a shinui to alter the thing and make it come on sooner. So since we're talking about refuah and medical things, in that scenario, nearly every posek would allow you to do that for somebody who is in the category of a choleh she'ein bo sakana. Certainly somebody who is critically ill, Shabbos becomes Tuesday. Obviously, you don't mess about, you put it on.
Then we just turn it on and that's it.
That's right. In that situation, yeah. So in somebody, let's say, who's got a fever, who's gone to bed because they've got a fever and it's mad hot in there, then yes, you would certainly be allowed to do what you've suggested in that question. Let's have a look at some more questions. What if he offers because he wants one? Don't know what that means.
That's talking about the cup of coffee. Is a non-Jew is in the room with you, and he feels like a cup of coffee, and he offers it to you also. Is it allowed to take it then?
Not if you're not ill, because you are then benefiting from a non-Jew having broken Shabbos.
But if it's a non-Jew,
but you have benefited from his. Remember, we have the halacha says that the 10 Commandments say you have to work for 6 days and then you rest. You, your manservant, your lady servant, your stranger, even your animals have to rest. So right, no, you can't benefit from the breaking of Shabbat by a non-Jew unless you're in a situation where you're a choleh. If you're a choleh, then we have to assess the situation accordingly.
I think I asked that question when you were talking about Alexa.
Right, Alexa's an interesting thing. Maybe we'll have a share on Alexa.
Yeah.
You could say, I can envisage a scenario that you say, Alexa, what's the halacha? Can I? Yeah, that's probably a good way of doing it. Will you get a Jewish Alexa? Okay, Deborah Fraser says, what about people with dementia? How are they classified? A person with dementia is probably halachically classified as a shota and is therefore in a completely different category altogether. Somebody who is suffering from dementia and would be distressed by not having something done for them would fall into the category of a chola she'ein bo sakana, almost certainly. And you would be, if that person would get distressed, significantly distressed because of a certain thing, you would be able to do it with Amir al-Akum, or you would be able to do a Darabanan with a Shinoi. Batsheva says, within 3 days after birth, can we suggest something else to eat? Yes, of course we can. Yes, that would be a sensible thing to do. Instead of having your omelette, how about having a hard-boiled egg, which I already have prepared before Shabbat? Yes, very sensible thing. Would taking medication, pressing out from a blister pack, violate another of the 39 malachot other than grinding? I think we've dealt with that. The problem is breaking the words. It's part of it's a tolda of ksiva, of writing, and mechik of rubbing out. Then we've got fantastic shiur. Thank you very much. Johnny Lighton has sent me some private messages, so I'll deal with those privately, Johnny. Very good. Okay, any questions before we go?
Thank you very much. It was a fantastic shiur.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. If you have enjoyed it, then please join us for other Techelet things. It's probably not, I mean, it probably is. It's okay for the Perth people because they're ahead of us. On Sunday, I will be doing a shiur at 10 o'clock Israel time, so 8 o'clock UK time in the morning, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon Perth time. The shiur will be about kitniot, what it is and what it isn't, and the various different opinions about kitniot. So please feel free to join. Avril will send the lovely flyer that she has not yet made. Oh, she has made it. Oh, okay. No, she's not made it, but she's going to make a lovely flyer for the kitniot shiur, and she will send it on the email and the WhatsApp group. Anyone who wishes to join our WhatsApp group or email list to get various information about the shiurim that Techelet is doing, please send a message either to me or Avril or to Dan, and we will add you to the various lists. And you are very welcome to join any of the things that we do. So, on that note, I will wish you all a very good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Johnny.